Here we are with the hunt for Blackbeard. This is Fort Circle Games. It's a game by Volko. I've been very happy with both, to be honest. This game has a little bit of a weird provender for me. I don't know where it came from. It just showed up at my door. Now, there's two places it could have come from. It could have come from Fort Circle. They've sent me a couple of games, Votes for Women and Tripoli, which is upstairs. I really liked Tripoli a lot. And so they sent me a couple as review copies. It's possible it came from there. More likely, one of my viewers asked for my address. Didn't tell me why. And, well, you know, it was a significant amount of time before this showed up, but not a ridiculously significant amount. And nothing else showed up that's kind of mysterious. So I think that's most likely the reason. This game was initially on GMT's P500 long ago. Didn't get a lot of marks for it. Like nobody was really willing to pick it up, even though it's a Volko game and he's done some of the coolest and most innovative things. Like I said, I've been very happy with him. Starting with the Coin series, Levy and Campaign, other stuff he's done as well. But those two series, I think, have shown, you know, a willingness to look at gaming in a very, very different sort of way than we normally do, right? And have spawned, you know, other people working on the same systems and everything. I don't think we'll see that here, but some of the ideas that are here are actually apparently have been implemented in another game since then, and he's also working on other games of this nature. So maybe, I don't know. The core concept, and he had some good designer's notes on this that are, I feel kind of weird because the designer's notes are like of a I guess there's no reason for the pirates to ever go there. They can't land the ship there, but yeah. So they're just for the ground troops here. The designer's notes seem very strange on a game that's so small and so simple in a lot of ways. It's not like, you know, it's going into details. A lot of it's more personal history type stuff with the design of the game. But the core premise of this was kind of an intelligence gathering game, and that would operate here, but he had a couple of other things that he's working on, one of which kind of seems exciting to me, has to do with trench warfare. The only problem with it is, at its very heart, it's not like Stratego, but it feels about as easy to solo as Stratego would. And that was actually what killed it in the P500s was GMT didn't want to do it without solo roles. And because it's clearly not a game you can solo easily, Volko worked through to try to come up with a solo system, a bot or something like that, but just wasn't happy with it, and I can see why. It's very much a game of bluffing and deception and all that, and that's really all you know. That's the core of the game. Let's take a look at some of the components, but essentially what's going to happen. Let me give a brief overview of what's going to happen before I touch on the components and then dig into the roles. It's not a very complicated game. The pirate Blackbeard is going to pick a certain location to be his base. And that'll be represented with one of these counters. His ship's going to be represented with this. I think the ship starts at the base. And he's going to move around and try to achieve, potentially, victory by filling out either acts of piracy or pirate's life. And basically, if he can get enough of these filled in, of the boxes in these filled in, at the end of the game, if the game ends at the end of the game, he wins. But at the same, that wouldn't be too interesting if there wasn't opposition. At the same time, the Virginians, we're going to call them, I guess, the hunters, are going to be using a couple of sloops and a ground force to try to capture Blackbeard. It's a hunt for Blackbeard. I kind of love this, simulating the true events, the way it's worded. It makes actual sense to put it that way, but it feels so much like a clickbait type thing, you know, or those, you know, those kind of thriller novels or something that are like, yeah, I'm not so sure how much I believe the true events actually. Well, we'll go into that a little bit, because one of the most interesting things in this whole thing is the historical supplement, which the actual history is written by someone who's done some significant research in the field and has ideas that are at odds with what has been sort of the received view on Blackbeard and maybe piracy in general in a lot of ways. Anyway, you're going to be drawing these and filling this out as the game goes. At the beginning, you only know 2 of them, and at the end of 4 turns, if you filled up half of the total little boxes that are present there in one of those 2 lines, then you've won as Blackbeard. You might have either become an actually impressive pirate and survived, or you've managed to do things that relate to going into a more civilian life and retiring from piracy. And your limitation on actions is going to be based on these little pawns. Both sides have them. You have some resources that we're slipping right into the components, aren't we? You have some resources that you're allowed to buy. They have a backside which indicates what they are. These all are the same on the back, and these are all the same on the back as well. But basically, these are visible to the player who has them to look at them. Now, all of this here is going to be hidden behind a screen that each player has. And the Blackbeard player will be sitting on this side, the hunter's over on this side. The screen doesn't contain any additional information. It has a nice little picture that can excite you. I haven't looked at the hunter's picture. Obviously, playing solo, I'm not going to really need that. That has a different picture, one more relating to the hunters. You also have some cubes. The black cubes are used on these black spaces. These are also black spaces. And the gold cubes are going to be going in your purse, and they're going to be used on spaces that have little gold squares on them. There's space here for these when you buy them to put them out. Again, all hidden behind there. And in fact, almost all the materials in the game are going to be hidden behind one or the other player's screen. The exception is what's on here. These are all game state markers that are not really hidden, that are only used for information that both players will have. Is there another exception? The black cubes, they probably should be hidden too. I don't know if it actually specifies that they should. So yeah. And then here, yeah, same as the pirate can buy defenses, this guy can commandeer assets that'll help them in their force. Now the interesting thing is the only place that he can commandeer assets is at the James River where he starts, which means the hunters have to prepare their expeditions and go, and they might want to do more preparation or less, depending, you know, the quicker that they can catch Blackbeard, maybe the less prep they need, and they might not be able to hunt him down over the course of the 4 turns which if Blackbeard's left alone should be pretty easy for him to win. I'm assuming. Haven't played before, so I don't know for sure. The board it's got a nice texture. Everything's got a nice texture. The board has these little slots that you can stand these up in, giving them a little bit more stability. These guys are all seagulls facing the Blackbeard player, which let him know that there's nothing of interest in those spaces. Now those will get replaced with these in certain cases, or with these. These are going to be hints that you've passed through. You know, it's gonna be notable that you were recently in a certain area with these, and that's going to be one of the forms of information, is that at certain times the hunters are going to be able to flip these counters up or turn them and look at them, depending on the situation, in order to conduct searches. And obviously you're going to have to look away from the board while players are manipulating these blocks. I guess they count as blocks. You've also got a pile of loot. This is the one. This is one way of randomizing things. One of the few randomizations in the game. Whenever you turn in a loot marker like this, or whenever you succeed in taking a loot, you get one of these. And you put it over here, and you get the amount of gold listed on it. Now this one indicates you get an additional gold. Those would go here with these little cubes. This might be useful for other reasons, though. There are other things that these taken loots are useful for, other than just pulling them out of the materials. Over here, the sailed box here is used to mark how many spaces you want to move your ship. These two pieces, the ship is used if, like with these, if something is discovered and it has the ship on it, the ship would go in the space. Now that would probably have the ship on it as well, but anyway. Now the pawns are also used for filling boxes temporarily. So what the pirate is going to be doing on his turn is he plans what he's going to do. Then the hunters take their turn. Then the pirate takes his turn. So the pirate secretly plans out what his turn is going to be and does it after the hunters, which are always visible on the map, although their commandeered assets are not. And that's important because of the bluffing type of aspect, etc. You don't know how powerful the hunters are, because if you did, there's another way of winning the game. Very clearly, if the hunters capture Blackbeard in an expanded version, which we are going to play, or defeat his ship, they win the game. That's their only goal. Well, they also win the game if Blackbeard is harassed enough that he can't achieve his victory conditions in 4 turns on either one of these lines. But Blackbeard can win in combat as well. If he takes either of the hunter ships, he wins. And those are automatic victories. You don't have to get to the end of the 4 turns for that. Which means that if Blackbeard builds up enough defenses and the hunters don't build up enough assets, it is quite possible that he could beat them in a fight and win the game that way. And that's why I say that, you know, it's all about deception and hunting and whatnot. These counters over here, these are used, sometimes these are going to be put marked face up, and these can be used to surveil the space so that you know if anything passes through it. And you get an immediate information on that. These are just informationals based on some of the stuff, I think all from the Pirate's Life. This is similarly, but from the piracy thing, it's an informational counter that lets you know that you can't careen your ship. The escaped marker, I don't know where that goes. There it goes. That's going to give a modifier. That indicates that Blackbeard has tipped off and he will have an easier time escaping. These are used for various hits on the ships, either against the crew or the rigging. And this is used to mark the camp in case it's A, discovered by the hunters, and B, known to have been discovered by the hunters by Blackbeard. And then it just stays face up on the map. The camp is not going to move. These are incredibly thick counters, all of the tiles and everything. The box is sturdy. Let's talk about some of the other components here. Each player has a player aid, which gives a great deal of information on it. I think almost everything you need to play. There is this, which gives you an example of the map so you can look at it while you're not looking at the actual board. Well, maybe you have to look away or whatever. And then all the tiles in the game. Now, this is important so that you have an idea of where your opponent, in the case of the hunters, where your opponent might want to be going, what areas are rich for him, whatever. And, you know, what combat capabilities they have. Also, I haven't talked about these yet, informants. The hunters get an informant every turn. And that gives them an additional capability of searching. And these are kind of hidden searches, again, unless they put these things there. We have another copy of some of this. This is just giving you some feel and linking into this historical timeline of the Blackbeard hunt. And what is this? This is giving a more blown up and important aspect of some of the key events that happen closer to the end. These are just historical, you know, things to help you visualize some stuff. They're not at all important to play of the game. One other thing, there are plenty of excess counters. For example, with the seagulls, there's 2 extras there. There's 1 extra of each of these pieces. I haven't looked at these. These look like there's 1 extra of each of them. There's probably 1 or 2 extra of those, just in case you lose something. I mean, you also have a couple of blanks in case you lose a tile. So that's kind of cool, I guess. One hopes you don't need them, though. All right. Now, we haven't talked about the books. So, this was a little weird. I opened it up, and I see I had a learn to play and this simulating the true events, and I'm like, oh, here's the rules. These aren't. This is kind of similar to Tim Jim's Games Let's Play. What is it? The VUCA game, I think, that I had recently. Baltic Empires may have had one too. But Imperial Elegy had one as well. It seemed to become more. I'm pretty sure Baltic Empires had one too. That was Volco as well. That was one of my favorite games. Like, that was my favorite game this year. This isn't going to match it simply because it's not going to play as well solo. And I don't have anyone to play something like this with, really. I don't know. I might, but it's a weird situation. Anyway. So I opened this up, and right away it's pretty clear this was not the actual rules. I gotta swap battery. Did end up reading it first, and I'm kind of glad I did, because it gives you an overview of the game. It's kind of weird, because eventually what it does, about halfway through, is gives you a sample playthrough of the entire game, from, you know, setup to finish, and then gives you this teaching guide, which is kind of weird. It's kind of like how to teach the game to other players, but like maybe opposed. and leaving things open so you can both see what you're doing, or maybe you're helping one person or you're bopping back and forth or whatever. All seemed very odd. I actually don't think that's all that necessary. I think most people who are going to be used to gaming can probably pick it up without having to go through a lot of the explanation. Well, of this kind of fiddle with the pieces to learn how to play it. It was helpful reading through this, but I gotta say the playthrough, for example, doesn't cover everything, right? So and this is a game where there's a lot of things that just didn't come up in it. They covered those in kind of an explanation afterwards of them, but I didn't feel like I was ready to play after this, even though they kind of act like you could be. However, it did provide me with a background on what the game was going to be like, and I'm not sure I would have felt as comfortable reading through the rules without having read this first. The rules would have probably been sufficient for me. That's my preferred way of learning, is through rules, but I think some of the information in here would have had to been here. I was kind of laughing when I first looked at this. It's a 28-page, little Let's Play type thing, which felt extreme, but it's not really. It has a complete version it has a complete playthrough of the game in it. So it's like 8 pages of rules. The actual rules are actually smaller, again, making me think this was the rules, at only 19 pages, and many of them are materials you have on here, more or less, with a little bit more detail on them. So it's actually only 14 pages of rules, as opposed to 8 in the consolidated version. But I do feel what's in here probably needs to be here. There isn't enough information in this to prepare you to play the rules. So I am glad I went in the order I did. I don't think that it was necessary. So far they feel understandable and clear. Again, it's not a complicated game. And then the final thing is the historical supplement, which is, and designer's notes, which is 21, well actually 20 because it has a cover, pages by Kevin Doofus, I'm sure that's not how he pronounces it, who wrote The Last Days of Blackbeard the Pirate. I'm assuming that's a relatively recent exploration in which he debunks so much. Now, I don't know, this is not the scholarly effort that I'm sure his book is. I'm sure his main book has footnotes and all that, and all kind of references. There are some references baked into here, enough to give it the semblance of believability and whatever. I have no idea, but it does seem like he's looked at stuff that other people haven't looked at, and that much of what we know about famous pirates, etc., comes from this by Captain Charles Johnson. I've heard these things repeated over and over again that come from this, and that a lot of it is largely bullshit. And according to the author, there's at least one completely made up pirate in here, and so it's not a very trustworthy thing. A lot of the information we have doesn't seem to fit. So Blackbeard is often seen as this especially violent and especially capable pirate, and the historical record doesn't seem to really show that. First of all, he wasn't very long lasting, and connections that were made again out of that one book don't seem to have any evidence for them, and there's no references within that book, so that's, maybe hearsay and stuff like that. Who knows where, history back then, it was not the same as it is nowadays. And one of the things is, something like this was a financial, effort. Most books are, right? And it was meant to be exciting and titillating and all that. Yet titillating, not titulating. What the hell? And so you can't really trust what's being said in it. There are plenty of true stories type stuff from our own recent, or not that recent, but our own past, in terms of like, if you think of some of the stuff, folk legends and stuff that get turned into histories, and it's like there's just not the reference material that backs it. There's not the first-hand sources that really back it up, and you don't know what people are making up and whatnot. And yeah. So this is kind of interesting, and he actually goes into a great deal of detail, especially on the elements of this period itself. And it's a very interesting read. It's kind of a bummer. Like, there's a reason those stories had such cachet. They're really exciting. But anyway, and then like I said, I didn't think this game deserved this much in designer's notes, but you know what? I think it does, because it showed insight into the hobby and into the way things are handled, etc. It showed changes in the design, etc. It didn't really go into the kind of historical argumentation for why things are represented a certain way, and that's what I usually look for in designer's notes. But here the story was interesting, so I'm cool with that. Overall, component wise, this set is pretty damn impressive. What about the rules? Well, we will get to the rules. I'm going to take me a little bit of a break, and I'll be back down here to go over the actual rules themselves. Like I said, they're not that complicated. Oh, I like these dice. So GMT usually has the rounded dice. This is, again, not GMT. They usually have the rounded dice that are a little too big. Well, a lot too big. This is about as big a set of dice as I like. And for a game of this level, I feel like these are the right size dice for it. Not like casino dice or Monopoly dice, but also maybe not the little Avalon Hill size dice that I actually really like rounded versions of and would definitely steal. Here, I may not steal these dice simply because I don't have a lot of dice. I don't have a bunch of dice like these. So, I wouldn't have an obvious place to put them, and they serve for the game. But this is really a two-player game. And, anyway, I'll be back down in a bit. Before we hit the rules, I think there's some information on the board that didn't come to my mind. These here. Yeah. These are how many of these tiles relate to a specific location. So if we look here, Bath Town has a whole shitload of tiles that relate to it. Anyway, let's start looking at what we got here. All right. Whenever a hunter pieces scout or end their move. So, do we have a sequence? Yeah, we have the sequence of play here. Let's look at this before we jump on the hidden information stuff. Play is going to be 4 turns. Each turn, players are going to draw one tile from each of their appropriate stacks. The Informants or the Pirate's Life and Acts of Piracy. I haven't really talked too much about the Informants. Basically, with any of these tiles, what happens is you play tokens on them. to affect their capabilities. Now, with an informant, you get to use him once. You get to hold him as long as you like. Once you have used him, he gets flipped over and he's no longer available. So even if you only put one token on him and get one piece of information, you can't keep using him. Okay. Blackbeard, on the first turn, figures out where his camp's going to be. Now here, there's this little camp marker. I put it there because there's a holding box for it. But the actual effect of this is you take one of these two camp markers, you only need one, and replace it in one of the legitimate locations. Which is an anchorage spot, which is one of these light brown anchors. Okay. The hunters then are able to use some of their pawns to mark down on one of their informants. I think they're only allowed to do one informant. No, maybe they can do multiple. And the informants have limitations on them. For example, this guy will only give you information about any four land, not islands or banks. Ocean is not land. Sound is not land. I don't know where banks are. I don't know. Now, it'll say bank on it or island on it. That's what they are. Okay. And we'll talk about open spotting. This is not that. This is interviewing informants is going to be secret spotting, which means you get to turn. Blackbeard looks away, and you get to turn counters over. Now, you probably want him to look away, even if you're not going to question an informant. Then Blackbeard does his planning. He puts his 5, maybe less, little men out on the board, either on these things, on the sailed box, to buy defenses, whatever. Defenses are going to cost you gold, and you start off with 5 gold cubes. I haven't put them out yet. Then the hunters use their pawns to pick up commandeering assets if they're in the James River. There are some exceptions. Some of the advanced counters work a little different. But then they can also scout, which is going to allow them to look at locations that they're near or in. Sail, which allows them to move along sea things. Now, where this says any, that'll allow me to go to any of these sea areas. Okay. Or march, which is going over overland connections with, I don't remember who he is. You got him there. Captain Brand. It's kind of interesting. Again, the perceived wisdom is that or previous historical accounts were that he had like 200 men with him who marched from Virginia. Oh, by the way, that historical analysis and whatnot, it shows how much this was a political issue more than anything else, and like political skullduggery trying to gain an advantage over North Carolina by Virginia more than any particular great worry about the piracy that Blackbeard was involved in. Okay, where were we? March. The hunters openly spot where their pieces either scout or end a move. Scouting is going to cost you a token, ending your move doesn't. And when you openly scout, you do it right in front of Blackbeard. You basically just flip a piece over. And then both of you get to see he gets to know that you scouted there and expended effort or whatever, perhaps. Encounters that ensue if any hunter or pirate pieces ended up in the same space. I don't know if that happens if the pirate is there and undetected. We'll have to look at that, and those can result in naval battles or an arrest attempt or whatever. After the encounters Blackbeard with pieces in the right place, i.e., for example, this says Cape Hatteras. If I'm at Cape Hatteras, these are going to be hard to read. They're a lot easier if I'm sitting where I'm supposed to be, as opposed, see, with the board the wrong way, no player would be facing the board this way. I can't read things because the blocks are blocking them. Okay, if he has pieces in the right place and he has plans to use that piracy, for example, here I would have marked this. I would then get 2 black cubes if I had 2 things there and I was in the right place, and then I would get the effect of that. In addition, this says show on it. What that means is that I have to expose that I'm there. Place the cubes onto the piracy tiles and that have pawns, and then we end the turn and prepare for the next. Now, somewhere between here, Blackbeard is going to reset the board and fix certain issues. So during movement, he does that. That'll be... Where is that? Oh, that's here. His movement's going to be covered in here. Yeah. Okay. I may have given a wrong impression there. Okay, let's talk about spotting. Whenever hunter pieces scout or end their turn at blocks that are standing up, they openly scout there. That block will be moved face up. When a face-up block first shows the camp, that camp marker will be placed in that location. That's not going to move. The hunters always know where it is, but Blackbeard also knows that you found it this way. Whenever a face-up block shows a symbol for one of these, and in the basic game just the adventure, you also put the appropriate wooden piece there, even though the block is showing both, or is showing that. Sighting. Sailing adventurers can leave a trail of sighting blocks. That's these things. Sailing adventure, the ship. At any moment that the spotting reveals a hidden sighting block, the hunters may spot in another space adjacent to it by a water route. If the second space reveals another sighting, they can spot a third space adjacent to that, and so on. Spotting the adjacent space secretly or openly, whatever they've been doing. So if they were doing a secret spotting, it's all just turning the counters and trying to see what's going on. Openly, it's right in front of Blackbeard, just flipping them down. Putting a sighting block face up at a surveil marker. These over here. You'd put that marker on with the block after you flip the block down. By sailing doesn't cause any additional spotting. So whenever I do hidden spotting, I'm allowed to keep looking. No. Whenever I'm doing spotting, but actually putting the sighting block face up and putting the surveil marker doesn't give me additional searches off that. Yeah, that makes sense. During Blackbeard's map actions, Blackbeard stands face up, map blocks vertical, and secretly changes the blocks to record the pirate movements. Players have to declare their defenses or assets when they actually use them before any rolls, and they place them out near the map to just indicate, yeah, we both know this. That's taking them from here on to there, or from here. Now, if both players want to use tiles at the same moment, Blackbeard declares first. Yeah, I don't know if that's a big deal. There are 3 advanced capabilities that Blackbeard has that he does not actually announce when he uses them. They're handled secretly. The longboat allows you to move Blackbeard himself to certain locations. Israel Hands allows you to move him to certain locations. Now here, this indicates, because it has the little gold Israel marker on it, it indicates that instead of the ship being at Bath, I can do it if he's there, if Israel Hand's there. And there are similar ones that'll show Blackbeard, who will be a black outline of the pirate in the location. And we'll see those and how they're kind of different. We can actually take a peek here. The graphics can be somewhat concerning, I guess. So, for example, here's a Blackbeard in a black box. Here's a Blackbeard in a gold box. Here's an Israel in a gold box, as different kinds of things that could be shown. Normally, though, you have to have the adventure, his little black ship there. Okay. Now we go back here. We already talked about setting the camp. Let's look at interviewing the informant a little bit more. So, when you're choosing to interview the informant, one by one you can place these pawns on an informant, and then it'll secretly reveal a location as indicated on the tile. You can put as many as there are little blocks on that tile. You don't need to pre-select the spaces. You can look at one and then decide whether or not you want to look at the next one. And then you secretly spot those spaces by turning them, peeking at them, turning them back. However, if you wish, you can put a surveillance marker at any blocks that you spotted while interviewing informants. Then you lay the block on the space face up and keep the block at the surveil marker face up for the rest of that turn. Those surveilled spaces may include blocks that were already face up or those that were spotted via finding a spotting block. It doesn't cost any extra pawns, but here's the thing. You will find out if Blackbeard goes through one of those spaces, but you've also told him that you've searched that space. And he may have an idea of what informant you have or something along those lines by what you just did. So there's reasons not to surveil a space, even though it will limit Blackbeard's movements because he doesn't want to give you information. He's not actually limited, but he has reasons not to. Blackbeard's actions. Okay. After the informants, Blackbeard uses his pawns to plan piracy in pursuit of victory, prepare defenses with the hunters, and sail his sloop. Follow the sequence below. For each of the 5 black pawns, you get to use it to do a thing. Okay, first you have to reset the map for the turn's actions. Set aside any pirate pieces, the wooden things, that are already on the map. Stand up all the blocks on the map to hide their symbols for the hunter, unless it's on a surveillance space. Then secretly replace any sighting blocks from last turn with blanks, or with the camp. Likewise, Blackbeard alone or Israel Hands gets removed and replaced with blanks. These 2 markers are basically things that you can do by sending either Blackbeard or Israel out to go do a task for you. The black-haired player should be sure to stand up all blocks vertically, except those that have a surveillance marker, even those where the hunter is, so that you hide what you've done. Now, piracy is these. You can put counters on these, and what you're doing is you're making a commitment that if you make it to that location, you will get to place cubes on those tiles. If you don't make it to that location, though, you don't get to do it. Place the pawns now on the tiles on one or both of the mat's piracy rows, but never more pawns on the tile than it has open squares. And then later, after any encounters, if you're still there, you get cubes there, and maybe you'll be able to generate some victory conditions. They mentioned that Blackbeard should commit to one or the other form of piracy. It's a waste to be trying to split your effort, but you may need to do some things in the pirate's life in order to operate at full effectiveness. And you may need to do some piracy in order to get gold that you need to do things here. So there's reasons that your decision, that you can't follow that rubric absolutely. Okay. Blackbeard, not Bluebeard, may acquire defenses, these things. Select any new defense tiles desired and place them on empty spaces here, and put a pawn on each new tile. These will also require you to put a payment in. So, for example, this is going to cost a couple of gold cubes. Those come out of your purse and they go away. In the advanced game, there's a bought silence. I should have this in here. That's an advanced one. That's an advanced one. There's the other one. There's a bought silence one, which doesn't cost you anything except a pawn to put it here, but once it's there, you can use it during play, without reporting actually, by paying out of your purse. And basically you'll bribe informants not to tell on you. Not informants, but the searches will go away. These things. Blackbeard also then will sail his sloop, pursuing piracy and invading or luring the hunters. He can move it via adjacent water routes, one pawn per space. You count the spaces moved and put that many pawns into the sailed space. You can't enter these, nor can you move by land with your boat. During Blackbeard's action, Blackbeard secretly updates the blocks on the map, always keeping one block per map space. Keep replaced blocks behind Blackbeard's screen so that your enemy can't see what pieces are not on the board. When you're sailing, you move the adventure block to the space where the sloop's going to end up. That's this block. Replacing the block there. If sailing to the camp, you put a block with both the camp and the ship on it. The space where the adventure began gets replaced with a blank, or with an empty camp if it was coming from the camp. If you sail through spaces, you have to put sighting blocks in the spaces that you moved completely through, but not at the start or ending block. If that happens to be a camp, you put the sighting at the camp. Is that right? Is that a pale gray? I am not seeing the sighting at a camp. There it is. Okay, yeah, there are a few others. So there's a sighting at a camp. There's the Israel Hands one. I'm going to have to probably dish those out. I was hoping to just have them bagged. I thought there wasn't anything different in there, but there are different things there. Then any blocks that had a surveil marker, I'm sorry, I lied. Now at some point, you had to get rid of all the sighting blocks. And I'm not seeing that here. Hold on. Here it was. In the reset map, you replaced the sighting blocks from the last turn with maps. With blanks. Okay. Because otherwise there'd be sightings all over the place, and that wouldn't really help your enemy, but he'd get to like chain and search everything, so actually it would. Okay. Where were we? Any blocks that are at surveil markers remain face up, not secretly, so the hunters can see whether or not you've moved through that area, or whether or not you're just sitting there. All right, we're going to pause for a bit because I want to relight my pipe. For longer than a bit, because I just realized I'm almost out of tea. Hunter's turn. First thing they can do is acquire assets. To commandeer an asset, they have to play a pawn on it. They have to be in the right location, which is the James River. Now, this one with the right thing. So, for example, this affects the two ships. If you have this, both these ships get this advantage, which is they get to sail from ocean and sound up to 3 spaces for one pawn. In order to buy this, you have to be in this location with both of the ships because it affects both of them. Some of these things only affect one of their pawns, one of their pieces, in which case only that person has to be there. We'll talk about the advanced ones later. Well, okay, we'll talk about it now. They have the canoes asset, which they can buy wherever they are. And that one has a slightly different color, supposedly. We have partisans also, which I think may be the same, but I'm not sure. Anyhow, the key here being, other than the canoes, once they head out of the James River, they're really not going to get another chance to upgrade their ships and their capabilities. And this is again a thing, because the things that Blackbeard may be planning, you have to make an estimate of what you're going to need to deal with whatever he's going to do. And in that pre-planning, you could lose the game in that sort of first turns planning with the hunters. Or you could kind of win the game by guessing right. Okay, scouting. Before and then again after completing any and all sailing and marching, the hunters are allowed to scout openly one space per piece for one pawn each. They could either scout their own space before moving, or one space adjacent to them. Any hunters can scout adjacent by land or water. They may not scout from Cape Henry, which is here. I think the key here being this isn't actually a space. Cape Henry goes to any of these seaside spaces. So you can't scout the entire seacoast from Cape Henry is really the issue there. The hunters can see the results of scouting with a pawn before committing more pawns to scout other map spaces. I think they're allowed to scout as many spaces as they like. I know it says here they can each scout their own space or one space adjacent to them, but that's at the cost of a pawn. So each pawn played allows you to scout something that requires that. 3 advanced assets affect scouting. Declare them as you use them. Sail and march. You move the sloops or brand to adjacent spaces for 1 pawn each. You put the pawns and position your pieces on the map to show where you go. So for example, if I was sailing this ship to here, I would go like this. And then if I wanted to sail to here, I would do this. And that would be 2 of my pawns used, whatever. But the sloops are allowed to sail together at 1 pawn per space. If you split them up, you're going to have to then spend more pawns to move them. Sloops can sail between Cape Henry and any ocean space for just 1 pawn, what I showed. Sloops may sail between any 2 ocean spaces by putting 2 pawns in the destination. So if I want to go from here to here, it would cost me 2 pawns. I don't think that's the case because I could sail along here. If I want to go from here to here, it would cost 2, or to here. Okay. As each hunter piece ends its movement for the turn, I openly spot the space it ends in, whether or not it moved. And that is done by flipping the block up. Once completing all sail and march for the turn, the hunters may use remaining pawns to scout as they did above, looking at adjacent spaces because they'll be stopped at the space they are. Now it says something here, scout as you go. The hunters are allowed to see what their scouting spots, yeah. So what they don't mean, you're not allowed to sail and then stop and scout and then continue sailing. This is a little confusing to say this, scout as you go. What they mean is you scout one location, and then if you want more information, you don't have to plot all your scouting at once, is what they're trying to say here. It's a little poorly worded. And if you get any sightings when you scout, that can cause collateral sightings, as we explained. All right. After the hunters have taken all their actions, you resolve encounters for each space that has both sides pieces. Pieces being these things. The hunters pick where first. If there are none, you skip forward to piracy. Okay. If an encounter involves at least one figure, either Brand, Blackbeard, or Israel Hands alone, the hunters can first attempt to arrest them. If both sides have sloops, after any arrest attempts might have been made, you perform a battle. Okay. You get dice from your pieces in an encounter, which will be adjusted by the tiles that you have, as well as firing hits on the units. The pirate pieces always start with 2 dice. Hunter pieces start with 1 die each. The hunter ships were smaller, although the crew was larger. So Blackbeard declares any tiles that he wishes to use out of his prepared ones and shows them. And then the hunter does the same. And then you roll however many dice that you got, and you look at them. Now, in firing during a battle, the rolls are going to be hits or misses. But with the other capabilities, arrest, escape, and bordering, the single highest die roll is what wins the battle. If somebody has no dice, the other side wins if it has a die. If neither side has dice, treat it as a tie. Hunters win tied rolls, including if neither side has any dice, until an escape, after which Blackbeard, and now I want to call him Blackbird, wins tied rolls. And that's this marker. Now there is an optional way to play this game where you don't roll dice, where the person who has the most dice wins for those types of capabilities. I don't think that's fun. There are actually a couple of options, but all right. If you're arresting, i.e. there's any figures involved in this, you make a roll. Whoever has the highest single die roll wins it. If the hunters win and arrest a black piece, either the adventurer or Blackbeard alone, they win the game. If you arrest Israel Hands, who is, along with Blackbeard, an optional, an advanced rule, whatever. If you arrest Israel Hands, he gets removed, his tile and figure get removed from play. Blackbeard will be allowed to show his camp if he wishes by laying it face up and adding 4 gold cubes to a purse. The pirate captain betrays Hands and takes his share of the money. If the adventurer beats the arrest attempt and only Brand is there, the adventurer has to escape, leaving the space. If unable to, the hunters win the game. If the adventurer beats the arrest and Jane or Ranger, that's these two, are in the space, a battle will ensue, and the hunters cannot choose to escape. The hunters can't choose to. This is the hammer and anvil rule. If you bring land and sea forces together, your sea forces are going to have to stick around. If Blackbeard is alone or Israel Hands wins, if Blackbeard alone or Israel Hand wins, he gets an escape in an arrest. Remove that piece from the map from now, put an escaped marker on the map. You know that the hunters are there, and you will be forearmed. Blackbeard was apparently, according to the historical information, and I looked up this guy's work, and he seems to have made quite a splash, actually. I don't remember what I was going to say. Oh, yeah. Historically, Blackbeard was not at all sure that the enemy ships were there to attack him, nor even less sure, even after he was, even after he opened fire, he was not necessarily sure that he was facing British officers. They weren't dressed as Brits. They wouldn't have been. And even if they were flying the right colors or whatever, they could be anybody. He had reason to fear that it was pirates he had basically screwed over and abandoned. Okay. So that's the way an arrest works. And escaping means you're going to be leaving the space. A battle. This is when there are sloops on both sides, whether or after having skipped arrest. The sloops will exchange fire and then determine who has the opportunity to escape. And then, if no one succeeds in escaping, they'll engage in a boarding battle. So for the firing, you declare whatever tiles, you roll the fire dice, and then you assign rigging and crew hits to the opponent's sloops. The hunter sloops can fire even if they don't have cannon. They're shooting muskets and whatnot. Okay. There are specific things. Philip Morton allows the Blackbeard to fire before the hunters get their shot, possibly reducing the hunter's capability to fire. This Crude to Ordinary, it has an effect on it, and I don't have it sitting here, but it would be setting out the marker so the opponent knows that you have that. Okay. 6s and 5s are hits. 6s are rigging hits, and they'll affect the escape rolls. 5s are crew hits. They'll affect the boarding rolls, reducing the number of dice that thing gets. And you'll see that here. Rigging hits, they don't say there. -1 to escape, -1 to board for crew hits. And this gives the to-hit number on those as well. Now, normally, 1 through 4s will be misses. But if you have chain or grape on here, those can hit as capabilities. And we can look. Grape here. A 3 or 4 will cause a crew hit. Chain, it'll cause a rigging hit. You don't want to buy both of those, because you can't have them both in effect at the same time. So you have to decide which one you're going for. Whether you want to try to escape or board the enemy. All right. After both sides fire, and no matter what, even if you're playing with that most dice wins option, you still have to roll the dice and allocate hits for this one type of battle. Or one type of die roll competition. Escape. After firing, resolve who's allowed to escape, declare any tiles, find the number of dice that you're allowed to roll, which might be impacted by rigging hits, and the winner of that die roll is allowed to escape if they're desired. However, they must sail by water to an adjacent map space, not Cape Henry, and if it's the adventure, not to a space that has a hunter piece in it. If the adventure escapes, first remove the piece, then Blackbeard updates the block on the adventure's new space secretly, i.e. the opponent looks away, unless the destination is face up and there's no sightings placed. If the Jane or Ranger escapes, it's allowed to do an immediate spot. If it's escaping, I don't know what it's hoping to find. But if either side chooses to escape, put the escape marker on its map box. And if the winning side opts not to escape, you go to the boarding capability. Now remember, under the hammer and anvil, you will not be allowed to escape with the hunters. All right, we got to swap batteries. We just got that here. If the adventurer escapes arrest by brand, but Jane or Ranger wins the escape, the hunters must board. They cannot escape away. The warning capability, Blackbeard knows, so he's more capable. All right, we can talk about boarding itself. You declare your tiles. You count the number of dice that you're going to get. You roll. Whoever gets the highest roll wins, or whoever had the most dice. The winning side seizes the enemy sloops as prizes and immediately wins the game. Boarding combat will always end the game. Let's swap batteries. Right, for piracy, I've already kind of talked about this a fair amount, but you add cubes to unoccupied squares on a piracy tile that has pawns on them, 1 cube per pawn, but you can only do it if you're at the correct location. If it's got dark gray squares, you put black cubes in it. Those tend to be the acts of piracy. If they have gold squares, you put gold cubes on it. That tends to be this, but you can see this one is not. It is a black cube in the surrounding area. The gold cubes have to come from your purse. And any pawns on gold squares beyond the cubes that Blackbeard can pay for the cube from his purse are wasted. You have to be in the right location where the adventure has to be in the right location. If not, you wasted your pawns. Now, some piracy tiles can get cubes if either Blackbeard alone, who will be the black dude, or Israel Hands, who will be the gold dude, are in the squares there. And in that case, that character just has, like, he could be in Bath and doing this exploration. This opens up more opportunities for Blackbeard. The adventure can always accomplish the cube placement. And the hunters can basically screw up Blackbeard if they end up in the location Blackbeard wants to perform his piracy. Because there will either be an escape, an arrest attempt forces an escape, or there'll be a battle that ends in an escape, or there'll be a boarding that ends the game. All right. The piracy tiles, this one, for example, generates a loot. This one, there's going to be a penalty marker here, crew to ordinary. We've got this, crew needs ordinary. It's going to lose a die off firing if you have this, until you fulfill it. So this is kind of a penalty to the piracy, where you have to fill something, to the act of piracy, where you have to fulfill something in Pirate's life if you want to be able to fight. It doesn't actually affect your piracy, though, but it affects your capability of dealing with the hunters. And the more piracy you do, piracy tends to have these shows. Of course, this has show as well, but Israel could go do this in the advanced game. Some tiles say take and show one or two loot markers. When you draw the random loots, you get the gold for them in your purse, and the loot markers go here. They could be used for something else. When filling Seek Pardon, select any other act of piracy or pirate's life. Yeah, we'll worry about these. Some of them have a penalty. This is a penalty. They're usually pretty clear. The Korean sloop, this is a weird one. It's a piracy capability that doesn't require you to show, but you can't do it on a turn that the adventure sails. It's a weird situation because it doesn't penalize you for not careening it. Now consider like Richard Berg's Blackbeard, the Avalon Hill game. That required, you needed to careen your ships in order to like make them fully seaworthy. There's nothing like that here. It's just something you have to do. It's an act of piracy that can give you victory points, essentially. Okay. After completing piracy in the turn, if it is the fourth turn, the game ends, and you see whether or not the pirate won. Otherwise, you prepare the next turn. The hunters get a new informant. The hunters flip over all their informant tiles that have any pawns on them. They can't use them anymore. Players clear all their pawns from their mats and map to make them available. All the surveil markers get moved aside, but leaving the blocks face up. Clear the sailed no careen marker from Blackbeard's map. Remove all hits from the ships. They don't carry over. And then you start the new turn by drawing the 3 new tiles, 2 and 1 by player. We've talked about how you win the game. You win the game by arresting Blackbeard or arresting the adventure That'll give a hunter victory. If boarding happens, whoever wins the boarding battle wins the game. Or at the end of turn 4, if Blackbeard manages to get at least half of the squares in one of his two rows filled in, he wins. Otherwise, the hunters win. One of the options is to require Blackbeard to fill more than half. Obviously, you can tinker with this however you like and make it bigger. They have detailed information on dealing with the cards, etc. Where are the advanced rules? I'm not seeing them. I thought they were here. Oh, bother. I swear there was a section 3, 16, 17. '16 and 17 spell them out. But I thought there was something that talked about them especially. It's interesting. Okay, we'll look at them here. So the longboat when setting the map and without declaring a tile, without declaring the tile, you can put a pawn, and once you've prepared it, once you have it here, you can put no, I got it wrong here. You can place Blackbeard as desired within 3 spaces of the camp by water or land where no adventure sighting or Israel hands. You don't use a pawn for this. And it will allow him to basically row out to a location and be able to do things in a space where he's allowed to do things. Israel hands, you have to pay 2 cubes to get this. You only had to pay 1 cube for the longboat. 2 cubes for Israel hands and a pawn to get him there. It works like the longboat, but you can place him in a town where the adventure Blackbeard or a sighting does not exist. If he's arrested, it eliminates the tile and the piece, but lets Blackbeard opt to earn 4 gold cubes into his purse by showing where his camp is. Bought silence is a particularly interesting one. You can grab this for just a pawn, but whenever you sail through a space, you can pay 2 gold cubes not to put a sailing sighting marker in play. Now the specials for the hunters, the hunter can commandeer canoes anywhere. For each scout segment, each hunter piece can spot any one space that is 2 spaces away if the intervening space is a sound. These are the sounds. And each one can do it. It still costs you things. Master Butler. The Jane and Ranger must both be at James River to get this. For each scout segment, Jane and Ranger may each scout to spot 2 spaces for 1 pawn per space instead of 1. Okay, that changes my interpretation. When we were looking at Scout, I was trying to figure this out. Where was it? Before and then after completing any and all sailing, you may scout one space per piece for one pawn each. Somewhere I was looking. I'm trying to find where this was. Okay. So you're only able to spot one space per piece. Which is, there was a wording that led me to think that that was not the case. May each spot their own space or one a space adjacent to them. Yeah. I don't know why I was, it's pretty clear the one space per piece for one pawn each is pretty clear. So I don't know why I said it the way I did. Like something had me convinced that that was not what they were talking about. It might have been this scout as you go thing. You still get this for free, the space that you end in. Yeah, that's an open scouting. Okay, so this would allow me to scout with the two ships, two spaces, but they still cost one pawn each. Brand, he's the blue guy, can acquire partisans only at the James River. Brand with partisans can scout 2 map spaces for just 1 pawn. That's kind of cool. And then we have an explanation of oh, what the fuck? This is meaningless. That's just acts of piracy versus pirate's life. This cashing in is just is just color. Okay. I am very worried that I will not be able to play this solo. For any fun. You know, that this is going to just be really uninteresting to try to play solo. I'm going to have to figure out mechanisms for, you know, making decisions like I do in lots of solo games. Because it's only a 2-player game, it's particularly pernicious in this way. So, for example, I can play diplomacy solo, where it's the surprise and the actions and the deals and whatnot that are arranged that really determine what actually happens. But this is feeling like playing poker solitaire or something along that line, which is why it feels like a very strange thing to have sent me, except maybe as if it was a challenge. If this was from a viewer, which is what I'm more inclined to believe, it feels very, very odd to me that, I mean, even if he loves the game or whatever, kind of knows that I don't play 2-player games with people. So I got half a thought that this is like, here, let's see if you can solo this. I don't really see a possibility of this, but I'm going to give it a shot and see what I can get out of it. All right, let's send this up, and I don't know when I'm going to get to it. I've got something else I'm playing upstairs in the loft, Mr. President from GMT, but as opposed to the old 3M one, which I've already done. But I think I want to get this completed before I go back up and fiddle around with that. So there's that. And yeah, this is going to be really challenging because I'm basically going to have to, make all my decisions off of almost nothing. The hunters are the initial tiles are going to kind of float what my decision making plan is, but then I'm going to have to roll dice for a lot of decisions, and that's not going to be a lot of fun, I fear. It's funny, we got the credits in here. I don't remember where the credits are. Stuka Joe was in the credits for playtesting, I think. May have been for aid in it, for something further in it. Who was most known for like designing solo systems for stuff like this. I don't know if he's tried to create something for it, but I wouldn't aim for something like that. What I want to aim for is that 2-player experience as best as I can get it in a solo play. Anyway, let's send this up.